I never imagined my life would change so drastically, so quickly. My name is Linda, and just a year ago, I was a wife, a mother, and by all accounts, living a quiet, content life in the suburbs. My husband, Mark, was my best friend and partner. For over 30 years, we built everything together. A home, a family, a sense of security that I thought would last forever. But when Mark passed away suddenly, my world shattered in ways I couldn't have prepared for. Losing him was like losing the ground beneath my feet. I was still reeling from the grief when the lawyer called me into his office. That's when I learned Mark had left me everything: his business, our investments, and, to my utter disbelief, a $30 million inheritance. I remember sitting there, numb, as the numbers were read out. It felt surreal, almost obscene to be handed such wealth. In the wake of such loss, but the real shock came when I told my daughter, Emily. She was always ambitious, always reaching for more. But I never expected her to look at me not with love or comfort, but with calculation. The moment she realized how much I'd inherited, something shifted between us. She demanded I give her a share right then and there. When I hesitated, when I said I needed time to think, I saw a side of her I'd never seen before. What happened next would tear our family apart in ways I never could have predicted. If I'd known the price of saying no, I might have done things differently. But sometimes it's the hardest choices reveal the truth about the people we love and about ourselves before everything changed. Our family life was simple, even ordinary by most standards, but it was ours. Mark and I met in college. He was the quiet, steady type, always thinking 3 steps ahead, while I was the dreamer, the one who believed in happy endings. We built our life on trust, laughter, and a shared belief that family came before anything else. Our home was filled with the kind of warmth that comes from years of inside jokes, late-night talks, and the comfort of knowing you're loved. No matter what, Emily was our only child, and from the moment she was born, she was the center of our world. Mark doted on her, teaching her to ride a bike, helping her with science projects, and cheering her on at every school play. I was the one who stayed up late with her when she was sick, who listened to her dreams and fears, who tried to teach her kindness and gratitude. We weren't perfect, no family is, but we were close. We had our traditions: Sunday dinners, movie nights, and summer road trips to the lake. Those memories are etched in my heart, reminders of a time when love felt simple and unconditional. Mark worked hard to provide for us, building his small business from the ground up. He was never flashy about money. In fact, he was almost frugal, always reminding us that what mattered most couldn't be bought. He believed in saving for the future, in giving back to the community, and in teaching Emily the value of hard work. I remember him saying, "Money is a tool, not a trophy. It's what you do with it that counts." Those words shaped the way I saw the world and the way I tried to raise Emily. But as Emily grew older, I started to notice subtle changes. She was bright, ambitious, and fiercely independent, traits I admired, but sometimes worried about. In high school, she became obsessed with success, always pushing herself to be the best. She got into a top university, landed prestigious internships, and surrounded herself with friends who seemed to value status and achievement above all else. Mark and I were proud, of course, but sometimes I wondered if we'd lost something. Along the way, a sense of gratitude, maybe, or the simple joy of being together. Still, we tried to stay close. Mark and I made a point of calling her every Sunday, visiting her on campus, and reminding her that no matter how far she went, she always had a home with us. There were moments of tension, arguments about her choices, her friends, her priorities, but I always believed love would see us through. I clung to the hope that, deep down, Emily still shared our values, that she understood the importance of family, of loyalty, of kindness. Looking back now, I see the cracks that were starting to form, the small ways we were drifting apart. At the time, I thought we were just going through a rough patch, the kind every family faces. I never imagined that the foundation we'd built could be shaken so completely, or that the daughter I loved so fiercely could one day see me as an obstacle instead of a mother. If I'd known what was coming, maybe I would have tried harder to bridge the gap. Maybe I would have asked more questions, listened more closely, or found a way to remind Emily of the values we'd tried to instill. But hindsight is a cruel teacher, and the warmth of those memories now stands in stark contrast to the cold reality that was about to descend on our family. It started with little things, so small at first that I almost convinced myself I was imagining them. After Mark's funeral, Emily stayed with me for a few days. She was attentive, helping with arrangements, fielding calls from relatives, and making sure I ate. But there was a restlessness in her, a distracted energy that I couldn't quite place. She scrolled through her phone constantly, took calls, behind closed doors, and seemed eager to get back to her life in the city. I chalked it up to grief. We all process loss differently, I told myself. But as the days passed, I noticed a subtle shift in our conversations. Emily began asking questions about Mark's will, about the house, the business, the investments. At first, her tone was casual, curious even. "Did Dad ever talk to you about what he wanted to do with the company?" she asked one evening, her eyes fixed on the flickering television. "Do you know how much the house is worth now?" Another time, she mentioned a friend whose parents had set up a trust fund, hinting that it was the smart thing to do. I tried to answer her questions honestly, but each one left me feeling unsettled. I wanted to believe she was just concerned about my well-being, about making sure I was taken care of. But there was an edge to her curiosity, a sense of urgency that didn't feel like love. I caught her rifling through Mark's office one afternoon, sorting through papers and files. When I asked what she was looking for, she brushed me off, just trying to help. "Mom, you're not good with this stuff." That stung more than I let on. I'd always managed our household, paid the bills, balanced the checkbook. Mark trusted me with everything. But Emily's words made me feel small, incapable, as if I were suddenly a burden instead of her mother. I tried to push the feeling aside, telling myself she was just stressed, that we both were. The real turning point came a week after the funeral, when the lawyer called to confirm the details of the inheritance. Emily insisted on coming with me to the meeting. She sat beside me, her posture rigid, her face unreadable as the lawyer explained the terms. Everything Marg's business. Our home, the investments, the life insurance was left to me. Emily would inherit only if something happened to me. I glanced at her, searching for a flicker of understanding, but her expression was cold, almost calculating. On the drive home, she was silent for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "It's a lot of money, Mom. You're not getting any younger. Don't you think it would make sense to start planning for the future? For my future?" Her words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. I tried to laugh it off, to remind her that I was still here, still capable, but she didn't smile. That night, I lay awake, replaying the conversation in my mind. I thought about the little girl who used to crawl into my bed after a nightmare, who once clung to my hand in crowded places. Where had that child gone? In her place was a woman I barely recognized, vicious, impatient, and suddenly so distant. I wondered if I'd failed her somehow, if I'd given her too much or not enough. The days that followed were filled with awkward silences and forced politeness. Emily began making suggestions, subtle at first, then more direct. "You should sell the house, Mom. It's too big for you now. Maybe you could transfer some of the investments into my name, just in case." Each suggestion felt like a tiny betrayal, a reminder that our relationship was changing in ways I couldn't control. I tried to reach out, to bridge the growing gap between us. I invited her to dinner, tried to talk about memories of Mark, about the things that used to make us laugh. But she was distracted, always checking her phone, always in a hurry to leave. I started to dread our conversations, afraid of what she might say next, afraid of what I might discover about the person she was becoming inside. I was torn. Part of me wanted to give her everything, to make her happy, to keep the peace. But another part of me, the part Mark had always encouraged, knew I had to stand my ground. I was still grieving, still trying to find my footing in a world without him. I needed time, space, and understanding. Instead, I felt pressure, judgment, and a growing sense of loneliness. Looking back, realized those were the first real cracks in our relationship. The moments when love and loyalty began to give way to suspicion and resentment. I wanted to believe we could weather this storm together, that we could find our way back to each other. But deep down, I sensed that something fundamental had shifted, and that the hardest days were still to come. It happened on a rainy Saturday afternoon, the kind of day that always made me want to curl up with a book and a cup of tea. Emily had come over supposedly to help me sort through some of Mark's things, but I could sense her impatience from the moment she walked in. She barely glanced at the boxes in the living room, her eyes darting instead to the stack of financial documents on the dining table. I tried to make small talk to ease the tension, but she cut me off with a sigh. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, her voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. She sat across from me, folding her arms, her jaw set in a way that reminded me of Mark when he was determined to win an argument. "I've been thinking a lot about Dad's estate, but what's fair?" I felt my stomach tighten. I'd been dreading this conversation, hoping it would somehow resolve itself. That time would soften her demands. But there was no avoiding it now. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "What is it you want to say, Emily?" She didn't hesitate. "I think you should give me my share of the inheritance now. There's no reason to wait. I have plans, Mom. I want to start my own business, maybe buy a place in the city. Dad would have wanted me to have a head start." Her words stung, not just for their bluntness, but for the way she spoke about Marquez, if she knew his wishes better than I did. I took a deep breath, searching her face for some sign of the daughter I knew. "Emily, your father left everything to me because he trusted me to take care of things. He wanted to make sure I was secure. This isn't just about money. It's about our family, about honoring his memory." She rolled her eyes, frustration flashing across her face. "You're set for life, Mom. You don't need all of it." "Why are you being so selfish? I'm your only child. Don't you want to see me succeed?" The accusation hit me like a slap. Selfish. I'd spent my whole life putting my family first, sacrificing my own dreams so Emily could chase hers. I tried to explain, my voice trembling. "It's not about being selfish. I'm still grieving, Emily. I need time to figure out what comes next. This money, it's not just a windfall. It's a responsibility. Your father worked his whole life for it." She leaned forward, her tone icy. "You're just afraid to let go. You want to control everything, even now." "Well, I'm not a child anymore. I deserve what's mine." The room felt suddenly smaller, the air thick with anger and hurt. I could feel my heart pounding, my hands shaking. I wanted to reach across the table, to hold her, to make her understand. But she was already pulling away, her walls up, her mind made up. "I can't do that, Emily," I said quietly. "Not now. Maybe not ever. This isn't how your father wanted things. I need you to respect that." For a moment, she just stared at me, her eyes cold and unrecognizing. Then she stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Fine. If that's how it's going to be, don't expect me to stick around and watch you waste everything." "I hope you're happy, Mom." She grabbed her coat and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The sound echoed through the house, leaving a silence that felt heavier than any grief I'd known. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty chair, wondering how we'd gotten to this point. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to teach her about love, about family, about what really mattered. Had I failed her, or had she simply chosen a different path? That night, I lay awake, replaying every word, every accusation. I knew things would never be the same. My refusal had set something in motion, a chain reaction I couldn't stop. I was terrified of what might come next, but deep down, I also felt a strange sense of resolve. For the first time, I realized that standing my ground, even at the risk of losing my daughter, might be the only way to honor both Mark's memory and my own sense of self. but I had no idea just how much more I would lose before this was over. The days after Emily stormed out were some of the loneliest of my life. The house, once filled with laughter and the comforting hum of daily routines, felt cavernous and cold. I kept expecting to hear her footsteps in the hallway, her voice calling out for me, but all I heard was silence. I tried to distract myself with chores, sorting through Mark's belongings, but every photograph, every old sweater, seemed to echo with memories of a family that no longer existed. Emily didn't call. She didn't text. At first I told myself she just needed time to cool off, that she'd come back once she realized how much her words had hurt me. But as the days turned into weeks, the distance between us only grew. I reached out, left voicemails, sent messages, even wrote her a letter pouring out my heart. I apologized for the argument, told her how much I loved her, how much I missed her, but there was no response. The silence was its own kind of punishment, a constant reminder of how fragile our bond had become. It wasn't long before the rest of the family got involved. My sister Carol called to check in, her voice gentle but probing. "Linda, I heard about what happened with Emily. She's upset. Maybe you could just give her a little to smooth things over?" I could hear the judgment in her tone, the unspoken accusation that I was being stubborn, that I was letting pride get in the way of peace. Other relatives chimed in, some siding with me, others with Emily. Family gatherings became tense, conversations awkward and stilted. I felt like I was being watched, weighed, and found wanting. The contrast between Emily's anger and my heartbreak was stark. She posted cryptic messages on social media, quotes about betrayal, about being let down by those you trust. Friends and distant cousins reached out to her, offering sympathy, validating her sense of injustice. Meanwhile, I was left to defend myself, to explain over and over that I wasn't trying to hurt her, that I was just trying to honor Mark's wishes and protect what he'd worked so hard for. I started to question everything. Was I being too rigid? Had I misunderstood what Mark wanted? Was I really the selfish one, as Emily claimed? The guilt gnawed at me, keeping me up at night, making me second-guess every decision. I replayed our last conversation endlessly, searching for the moment when things went wrong, wishing I could take back my words, or at least soften them. But beneath the guilt was a deeper pain, a sense of betrayal that cut to the core. I had always believed that love would be enough, that family would hold together no matter what. Now, I felt abandoned, not just by Emily, but by the very idea of what our family had been. The people I thought would support me seemed to drift away, uncomfortable with the misances of our conflict. Unwilling to take sides, I tried to fill the void with routine morning walks, volunteering at the library, coffee with old friends. But even these small comforts felt hollow. Everywhere I went, I saw mothers and daughters laughing together, sharing secrets, moving through the world as a team. I envied them, resented them, even as I longed for that closeness with Emily again. The isolation was suffocating. I missed Mark more than ever, missed his steady presence, his ability to see the bigger picture. I wondered what he would have done, what advice he would have given. Would he have sided with me or tried to broker peace? I wished I could ask him, wished I could lean on him just one more time. As the weeks dragged on, I realized that the fallout from that one argument had rippled through every part of my life. I was no longer just grieving my husband. I was grieving the loss of my daughter, the loss of the family I thought I knew. The pain was overwhelming, but somewhere deep inside, a small voice began to whisper that maybe, just maybe, this was not the end of my story. Maybe there was still a way forward. Even if it meant walking that path alone. It took me longer than I cared to admit to realize I couldn't keep living in limbo, waiting for Emily to call, waiting for the past to return. The ache of missing her was still there, but it was joined by a new, quieter, painless sense of losing myself in the process. I knew I needed help, so I reached out to a grief support group at the local community center. Walking into that room, For the first time, I felt exposed and vulnerable, but also strangely hopeful. Here were people who understood loss, who didn't judge or offer easy answers. I listened to their stories, shared my own, and for the first time in months, I felt a little less alone. One afternoon, after a particularly emotional meeting, I sat in my car and let the tears come. I thought about Marquette. He would say, if. He could see me now. I remembered his quiet strength, his belief in doing what was right, even when it was hard. I realized I'd been so focused on keeping the peace, on not losing Emily, that I'd forgotten to honor my own needs and boundaries. I couldn't give away everything Mark had worked for just to avoid conflict. I had to respect his wishes, and my own. I started to make small changes. I met with our family lawyer again, this time not out of fear, but to understand my rights and responsibilities. I updated my will, set up a trust for Emily's future, and made sure everything was in order. It wasn't about shutting her out, it was about protecting what mattered. About making decisions from a place of strength instead of guilt. I also began to reclaim my life in other ways. I joined a book club, started volunteering more regularly, and even took a weekend trip to the coast by myself. Each step felt both terrifying and liberating. I was learning to enjoy my own company, to find meaning outside of being a wife and mother. I missed Emily every day, but I also started to see myself as more than just someone's parent or spouse. I was still Linda, still capable, still worthy of love and respect. Setting boundaries with Emily was the hardest part. When she finally reached out, it was through a terse email asking again about the inheritance. My hands shook as I typed my response, but I was clear and kind. I told her I loved her, that I wanted a relationship, but that I couldn't give her what she was asking for, not now, and maybe not ever. I explained my reasons not as an apology, but as a statement of my values and my love for both her and her father's memory. I didn't know how she would react, or if she would ever forgive me, but for the first time I felt a sense of peace. I was no longer waiting for someone else to decide my worth or my future. I was choosing for myself what kind of life I wanted to live. The road ahead was uncertain, and I knew there would be more pain, more difficult conversations. But I also knew I was strong enough to face them. And that, I realized, was the beginning of something new. In the months that followed, life settled into a new rhythm, one that was quieter, but also more honest. Emily and I spoke only occasionally, our conversations careful and measured, as if we were both afraid of saying the wrong thing. There were no more demands, no more ultimatums, but there was also no easy forgiveness. I missed the closeness we once shared, but I understood now that love sometimes means letting go of what you wish could be and accepting what is. Some relationships, surprisingly, began to heal. My sister Carol, who had once urged me to give in for the sake of peace, called one evening and apologized. "I didn't realize how much you were carrying, Linda," she said softly. "I just wanted everyone to be happy, but I see now that wasn't fair to you." We talked for hours, sharing memories of Mark, laughing and crying in equal measure. It felt like a small patch of sunlight breaking through the clouds. I also found unexpected support from friends in my book club and the women at the community center. They listened without judgment, offering advice only when I asked for it. Their stories of resilience and reinvention inspired me to keep moving forward, even on the days when loneliness threatened to pull me under. I realized I wasn't the only one who had faced betrayal or heartbreak within their own family. There was comfort in that shared understanding, a reminder that I wasn't as alone as I sometimes felt. With time, I began to see Emily not just as my daughter, but as her own person, flawed, searching, and still growing. I stopped blaming myself for her choices, and instead focused on being the kind of mother she needed now, steady, loving, but firm in my boundaries. I sent her birthday cards, little notes of encouragement, and invitations to family gatherings. Sometimes she responded, sometimes she didn't. Each small interaction felt like a step forward. Even if the path was slow and uncertain, I found new purpose in honoring Mark's legacy. Not just through the money he left behind, but in the way I lived my life. I donated to causes he cared about, volunteered at the local food bank, and even started a scholarship in his name at the high school where Emily graduated. These acts of giving brought me a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time, away to turn pain into something meaningful. There were still bittersweet moments, of course. Holidays were quieter, and there were days when the ache of missing Emily was almost too much to bear. But I learned to sit with that sadness, to let it remind me of the love we shared rather than the distance that remained. I discovered a quiet strength within myself, a resilience I never knew I had. In the end, I realized that healing doesn't always mean everything goes back to the way it was. Sometimes it means finding beauty in what remains and building a life that honors both the joy and the sorrow. I was no longer just surviving. I was living with purpose, with hope, and with the knowledge that I had done the right thing, even when it broke my heart. Looking back, I never could have imagined that losing Mark would be only the beginning of my journey. Grief has a way of stripping you bare, forcing you to confront not just what you've lost, but who you are when everything familiar falls away. I learned that love isn't always enough to keep people close, and that sometimes the hardest thing you can do is stand firm in your own truth, even when it means disappointing the people you love most. I've come to understand that isn't measured by what you give away, but by what you choose to protect. Setting boundaries with Emily was the most painful decision of my life, but it was also the most necessary. I had to honor Mark's memory, my own needs, and the values we built our family on. In doing so, I discovered a strength I didn't know I had, a quiet resilience that carried me through the darkest days. If you're facing your own family conflict or struggling to find your voice in the midst of heartbreak, I want you to know you're not alone. It's okay to grieve, to feel lost, to question everything. But it's also okay to choose yourself, to set boundaries, and to believe that you are worthy of love and respect no matter what anyone else says. Healing isn't a straight line, and forgiveness doesn't always come easily. But every step you take toward honoring your own truth is a step toward peace. My story isn't over, and neither is yours. There are still lessons to learn, relationships to mend, and new chapters waiting to be written. So hold on to hope, trust your heart, and remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply keep going. And if you think this story was powerful, wait until you hear what happened when I finally opened Mark's last letter to Mia's secret that changed everything once again.